We're here at the Lamprey Hackett Post 72 of the American Legion, and it's Sunday, April 10th, 2005, and I'm Bill Payne, and we have Alan Brzezinski with us here also, and Kate Norton and Matt McElreath, our technicians, and today we are interviewing...
My name is John Martine. I lived here in Saugerties for 42 years now, and I've been a member of this post for about 17 years or so. So if I say about or approximate, after 50-some years, I may be off a month or two. But so that's just a little by. I had the unique experience of being in two different services. I was in the Navy and the Air Force. I was in the Navy from July 1947 till July 1950. And then I joined the Air Force from 1951 to 1955. I guess one of the reasons I switched services, I found life aboard a ship very confining. I was on a destroyer escort, which is only approximately 300 feet long. And there's absolutely no entertainment, or no facilities at all. You know, first 2 weeks on a destroyer is fun. It's like a cruise. But after that, you work 7 days a week. There's no Saturdays or Sundays on a ship. You work 7 days a week. And let's see, so...
so now, you enlisted in the Navy voluntarily. You didn't get...
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And where were you living when you enlisted in the Navy?
Okay, one of the reasons I did join is the way I did. I graduated in June of 47, and in July of 47 I was in the service. I had, you know, I thought of it, I said, well, if I don't go now, 2 or 3 years from now I'll be drafted. Mm-hmm. And I says, why delay the inevitable?
Where were you living at the time?
That was another for you. I lived in a coal mining town, small coal mining town, Pennsylvania. Let's just say it this way. Employment opportunities were very limited. We didn't even have McDonald's in that day. I would have worked in McDonald's or any place, but we didn't have any of those. I worked in a little coal mine.
What was the name of the town?
Maysville.
Mm-hmm. And you worked in a coal mine?
Well, my father, years before that, my father owned a small, him and another group of men actually had a small coal mine. But when I was about 16, I got a job in a coal processing plant. And my job was to pick the rock from the coal. Rock, coal. Rock. Let's say after about 20 minutes of that, you've had it. So anyway, I still have a bit of coal. So I decided to join the Navy and get it over with. Mm-hmm. My uncle was kind of responsible for me joining. He was in the Navy during World War II. He told me how great it was, and even gave me special gabardine tailor-made suits and everything. I said, boy, I was hot stuff with that. So when I joined the Navy right after school, as I said, in 1947.
Where'd you go to boot camp?
And I went to basic training was in Great Lakes, Illinois, which was where probably most of them went. And it was a 12 or 13 week period. And in there, they teach you basic. They gave you a book, almost like a Bible. It was called a Blue Jacket Manual or something, if I recall correctly. And it's, let's see, you spend a week with, learning, with some book learning as well as a lot of marching. Mm-hmm. And the Marines taught us how to shoot a rifle and 45 pistol. And then another week we spent learning how to put fires out on a ship. Another week we had to learn how to swim and how to jump off a ship and use your pants as a buoyancy. So every week there was something. And 1 week we had KP. That was a fun job, getting up at 4 o'clock and getting breakfast ready by 6. But every week there seemed to be something. So for the 12, 13 weeks, we had a full 12 to 13 weeks there. So, and also while we were there, 1 week was dedicated to giving tests of different people to find out what job they would be best suited for while they're in the service, in the Navy anyway. So I was lucky enough that I qualified for electronics. And at that time, electronics was the new, just like your equipment here, it was the new stuff. So I ended up in Great Lakes, staying in Great Lakes. I went to school, basic school there for approximately 30 weeks. That was the basic. So anyway, when I finished that, I qualified to go to advanced electronics training in the Naval Research Lab in Washington, D.C. for about another 15 weeks. So when I got done with all that, I got sent to shipboard. So the ship I was assigned to was the USS Malloy. 791 was the number on it. And it was a destroyer, and as I said, a destroyer was only about a little over 300 feet long. And as I said, the only entertainment activity we had was a movie at night. The old, you know, almost like a homemade movie. So we didn't have any, any real entertainment there. And there again, I say you work, 4 on, 8 off, 4 on, 8 off, 24/7. And naturally, when I was assigned to the ship, I was an electronics technician. So I get on board, and there's no one there on electronics. The one fellow that was there was sick, so oh boy. Yeah, I felt like I was drowning when I reported. But anyway, a week later he came back, and then a couple of weeks later we had another electronics technician come on board. So it ended up, there were 3 of us, electronic technicians, to take care of the whole ship. And we were all 19 years old. And we had to take care of all the radar, all the sonar, the fathometers, transmitters, receivers, LORAN, everything on the ship we had to take care of it. But it wasn't that bad because there wasn't that much. They were fairly reliable units. However, there were short radar men on the ship. So since they knew we knew how to operate the radar, they put us doing radar watches with the radar personnel. So we learned how to plot and so on, and do all the radar activities. You watch movies, if you ever see what they call this Combat Information Center, that's what we work. That's where we work. But it was a small unit. The room was not much larger than a big bedroom, but the units were there. A destroyer, you didn't expect to have the same amount of equipment. Now a carrier, they have a lot more. But anyway, we got along, fairly well with no big problems there. And the only other thing is, you just didn't have your primary code of electronics maintenance, but we had that being help the radar. Then when I came in port, my job was to run the fathometer, check the depth of the water as we came into port, so we wouldn't scrape the bottom. Another one of my jobs was, this was a good one. I was a fire control radar operator, controlled the guns, and I had a 19-year-old kid. I used to sweat it every time we did it. That wouldn't make a mistake. So I operated that, and then that was for general quarters or battle stations, whatever you want to refer to it as. Then everybody else had multiple tasks. Like when it was abandoned ship, I had to do something. When it was man overboard, I had another task. And all the various tasks each person had, and even when we had a ship aboard fire, I had to run around with a portable pump with another fellow. So we all had multiple tasks. Not only me, everybody had the same thing. On a ship, you have to be very self-sufficient.
This was during the Cold War period, right?
And this was from 47 to 50.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I forgot to define the mission of the ship I was on was actually, we had 4 or 5 civilians aboard with scientists. Our job was to develop, not ours, but the civilians aboard us. They had a design, or they're working on designs and developments of new sonar equipment. Because we say the Cold War was starting, and I guess submarines were trying to sneak in and all that stuff. So,
where were you sailing to when you sailed?
well, anyway, one thing we had to do is, the civilians required that we'd be in warm water primarily. Because when you take sonar readings, if the water temperature, the temperature gradient of the water would change after so much depth. Well, you can probably even check that, when you're going locally. But anyway, so they wanted to be, the water would be so many feet deep that with a certain temperature, warm. So that way you'd get through readings as they were developing the radar. because if they took readings and they got readings back, then they made a change in the design, you're just defeating the purpose. You know, it's just like shoveling against the tide. So, but anyway, we spent a lot of time down in Guantanamo Bay. Our home port was the subbase in London, Connecticut. And the reason that we were there was the underwater research laboratory was about just down the river from where we were at. And in the summertime, we were able to stay in the Long Island Sound and off there because the water did remain fairly even for what they wanted to do. We didn't get involved with any of their activities. The civilians kept them themselves, and they, we had to do our own job. One time, though, we did have a problem we couldn't fix in a radar. And somebody asked one of those fellows down there, did they know? He said, oh yeah, I helped design it. So he come up and gave us a hand, and bing, bing, boom, we were done in 10 minutes. But other than that, we didn't have much to do with them, just courteous stuff. Mm-hmm. So let's see, what else happened on the ship? Okay, some of the things on the ship. Well, besides all the other activities, tasks we had, as a petty officer, I was only 19. One thing about the Navy, they do promote pretty good on merit. Well, when I was in, now things changed maybe, but you took tests, and if you passed tests within a certain reason, you went on a list, and you moved up the list. And if you were pretty high, you get promoted. You get the next rank. I think me and another fellow, the other lieutenant, we both were only 19. Maybe we turned 20, and we were already equal to staff sergeant. And we go boom, 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 right up. So I thought it was, that you just took the test, and of course you had to be a good boy. You didn't, you didn't get any fights and all that other stuff. I come in drunk every night when you're doing port. But speaking of being in port, as a petty officer, we used to have to pull shore patrol. Now, our ship had a complement or a crew of about 180. And the ship was divided into 3 sections. So we had 3 watches. So if you were on watch, you had to send so many people on shore patrol to keep the other 120 that went on furlough in line. So I used to go with this one big fella. Another thing, when I joined the Navy, I was so small, I made it by 2 parents. I was a certain height. The guy said, the Army would have taken me tomorrow, but I didn't want to go in the Army. So anyway, we went on shore patrol. They used to always assign maybe a smaller fellow with one big fella. And I remember this one fellow used to tell me, he said, John, no, he didn't even call me John, I call him Martine. He said, we're getting a fight. He said, you run for help. He said, I'll hold them all. But it was more of a joke among us. But we pulled shore patrol, I think about 3 or 4, in Miami, nice places. We had shore patrol in Miami, Key West, Florida, Norfolk, Guantanamo Bay. We spent a lot of time in Guantanamo Bay because that had warm, and not only that, the water off the Cuba is very deep. And that's another thing they wanted was where the water was, a sufficient depth where the submarines could go. Well, we had submarines working with us because that's how they tested the sonar out. And then I guess the submarines tried to evade the sonar. We weren't involved in all that stuff, but we just know what was going on. Let's see. Let's see. Before I leave the Navy, let me see what else. I learned one other thing. You learn to read anything on a bulletin board very carefully. I was saying about operating a fire control radar. Well, we didn't have battle stations or GQ very often because, they just did every so once in a while. But I wanted to learn more about it. So one day they had on the bulletin board, fire control school, Rhode Island, blah, blah. I said, well, it's good to get off the ship for a week. And so I signed up. So I told the guys, hey, I'm going to go off the ship for a week. He said, where to? I told him. He said, did you read that right? And I said, what do you mean? I go running down there, and it was too late. They had removed that, and the yeoman already made orders and shipped them out. and it was, instead of fire control radar, I just automatically put the word radar, with just fire control, was how to fight onboard fires, real fires. Oh, so I went to Rhode Island for a week, and it was still cool, like early April, the water was cold, and I mean, when they set fire, they had buildings erected similar to like a ship would be. And if you ever been on a ship, they have catwalks. I mean, they don't have big, you know, wide boardwalks for you. But anyway, they'd set oil on fire inside the little makeshift building, and then they give you the hoses and go put it out. Well, I mean, we had a leader and we had all the training, but still, you know. And one other fire that was amazing to me was they had a thing built almost like a Christmas tree, and they pumped gas out of it, and then you had to go put it out. So you just couldn't use a hose because you just spread the fire. You had to go in there with the spray and, oh, but hey, after a week, I said, that's it. So next time I says, I'm going to read everything very carefully and not volunteer. So anyway.
So you had one tour in the Navy then?
Yeah, I had the, okay, let me get discharged now. I don't know of anything extra in the Navy. And the rest of it was very routine, you know. The highest entertainment we had was, you weren't allowed to gamble either. I don't know when you guys were in. But we used to go out there and we'd put quarters on it. We'd go up the gun tub and high, we'd play, put your quarter on there and you'd let go and see if you can catch it. You'd stop your foot and see if you can catch it. That was our entertainment for quarters. Some guys could do it pretty good. But anyway, let's see, what else? Let's see, I told you the mission, and the submarine base I said was in New London, and we spent our winters up there like for Christmas time. We did come up and they give half the crew Christmas and half New Year's. And since I was single at that time, to me, I didn't have to be concerned about Christmas with the family. I said, you know, that's the way they use, most of them volunteer, the single guys to take New Year's. We each got 10 or 12 days off, each group. So then right after we all got back on the ship, we headed right back down to Guantanamo Bay. In Guantanamo Bay, I pulled shore patrol there. They had some nice, some base housing for people. I said, boy, that would have been a nice place to be stationed. And, you know, beaches, we used to go horseback riding on the beach and all that. You know, we had time. Oh, one thing I didn't like with the Navy was, the ship, well, the ship I tell you was small. We used to sleep 3 high. I had the bottom bunk. And beneath the bottom bunk, there were 3 lockers. One for me, one for the guy in the middle, and one for the guy located on top. So every time they had to get in their locker, and I was in the bunk, I had to get up, lift my bunk up. They got their stuff, and then they take it out, and I'd put my bunk and go back to bed. So most of them were pretty good. They'd get their stuff ahead of time, so they wouldn't have to wake me if I just got off watch. There's one other thing about Guantanamo Bay, let's see. Well, then anyway, that's another thing. We had some real good ports of call. We ended up, we went to Bermuda one time for a weekend or 2. We went to Kingston, Jamaica, and we were in Mexico. And one time went to Havana, Cuba. This is before Castro. Who that was? Batista, I think, was King of the Hill then.
Batista, yeah, that's right.
Batista was the King of the Hill then down there. So, but so we didn't. I mean, we had our good times, the bad times, and they told us when you went to Mexico, I think it was this time, don't drink the water. We didn't. We drank beer and Coke. There's no Pepsi in them days, I don't think. We just Coke. So, but we had a salad and it had water on it. It don't take much, I guess, to give you dysentery. Boy, I'm telling you, that was very uncomfortable. And as a matter of fact, we ended up going to hospital, about a dozen of us. We got it so bad. You know, people think it's fun, but when you get, and on the ship, that's another thing. A small ship like that has no doctor. We had a medical corpsman who had the rank of chief petty officer, but I'd say he was the equivalent of a LPN in our world now. And, but he couldn't do much for us, you know. He didn't have all the medication probably and so on. So anyway, they ended up dropping us off at Guantanamo Bay hospital. And we had to wait then 2 weeks till they came back from their next run. They usually used to take like a run out for 2 weeks and pull in some port for rest. And when you pull in the port, you know, usually tie up. And so, hey, if I'm running too long, let me go. So anyway, okay, so anyway, I guess it was, my 3 years came to a close in the middle of July 1950. So I said, well, I didn't know that I was going to, you know, go to GI. I didn't have a full GI. I had GI Bill, and I kept my old GI insurance I've been paying now for 50 years. And it's really cheap insurance, or should I say inexpensive insurance. And, but I didn't qualify for it. I got some GI Bill. Then the Korean War started, shortly after around the time I got out of the Navy. And so I looked for a job, and I got a job working for the Army as an electronic technician down in an Army supply depot.
Where was that located?
Middletown, down near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Right.
I think it was Middletown was the name of the place. It was right near 3 Mile Island.
Yeah.
That area, I think down in that area it was.
Yep.
So anyway, let's see, I worked there about 8 months. And the war in Korea was intensifying because the Chinese now were getting involved with the North Koreans. I said, oh no. I said, I don't want to go back on the ship again. Because I figure if they start calling people back, guess the first guys they're looking for, electronic technicians. I said, I'll be back on it. Maybe if I got on the aircraft carrier, it would have been more, something like that. Matter of fact, you read right now, the average age of a sailor on the deck of the aircraft is only about 20 years old. And they have long days, 14, 16 hours on some of those aircraft. So anyway, I didn't want to go back. So I was waiting. I said, gee. And I know one or two of my buddies who, friends from that lived in that same town, that had joined the reserves. I didn't join the reserves. They did. And they got called back, and I said, oh boy, after them, I'll be next. So anyway, I said, I'll join the Air Force, because I said, I want to become a pilot. I said, oh, you know, everybody wants to be Top Gun. Them days they didn't call it Top, but everybody wanted to be. So I says, so I joined the Air Force, and I was shipped down to Bowling Air Force Base. And that's an Air Force base right in D.C. area. So the only thing is I wasn't trained on aircraft. So I get down there, and I was strictly big equipment, like big transmitters, big radars on the ship and all that. So anyway, the sergeant there, they just says, well, we'll retrain you out there. And
Did you have to go through like an Air Force boot camp? Or
no.
Maybe you already covered that.
I lost 1 grade.
Right.
I say I was a staff sergeant, I was petty officer 2nd class in the Navy.
Yeah.
And they reduced me, because I was out more than 90 days, and I changed services, which made it, a double thing. He said, but the recruiter said, you'll be back in 6 months, which actually 7 months it took me. I made my rank right back. But anyway, when I went on the bowling, they were training me to work on there, and I didn't like that. It was a replacement thing. You go in there, you take the thing off, you take off a bad radio that the pilot or whoever complained about, you take it into a workshop, and somebody else would work on it, and you just take one off the ship. We're on the Navy, on the ship. There was none of this, you fixed it. It was broke, you fixed it. That was it. There was none of this, I'll switch. And anyway, so then I was there about 4 months, and they had a call from Washington National Airport. They wanted somebody who can work on ground equipment. And everybody looked around there. There I was. But when he said Washington National Airport, I said, that's a civilian airport. It's Ronald Reagan now. I think it's called Ronald Reagan Airport. And I said, what the heck? So I go over there, And my main job was to be, take care of all the air police vehicles and other ground equipment like PA systems, intercoms. There's nobody there, and they're having trouble with air police. And the mission on that particular area was they had about 10, 12 planes at the far end of Washington National Airport. And in these hangars, they had all these VIP planes, like the congressman would check out to go fly here and so on. And in one hangar by itself was President Truman's plane.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the last one to have a propeller job.
Yeah.
He had a Constellation, if I recall correctly. But I still didn't work on aircraft. I was the gopher running around doing all that. Now there I had to change the vehicles, police vehicles. They want their vehicle fixed now, so I just swap it and then I take it back and fix in the shop. And I was by myself. So anyway, I was there, well I told you I was at bowling only about 4 months. And then I went over there and I was getting along pretty good and I put in for pilot training, to attend cadet. So I guess, I don't know how, I had to take some mental and physical tests down in DC area to at least see if I could make it. So I passed those and I went up to Sampson Air Force Base. It's by the Finger Lakes, up here near Syracuse, up in that area somewhere. But anyway, I didn't qualify for pilot training. However, with all my experience and with radar in the Navy, I could plot and do it. And another thing I used to do on the ship was run the LORAN equipment. This is the long-range radar navigational equipment. You know, when the executive officer couldn't do the old sextant bit on finding the location of the ship, we used to do it electronically with that thing. So anyway, I learned. So he says you qualify for a radar observer weapons officer. So I said, oh, okay, I'll take it. Take what I get. And he said, no, Dad. He says, after you learn all that, he said, you keep an eye on what goes on up front. He said, then maybe you can move up the front seat. I said, yeah, okay. He said, you'll go through as an officer rather than enlisted man. He said, so I agreed. But anyway, I guess there was, let's see, I was there about, let's see what else happened at, I'm trying to recall what happened at Special at National Airport. Well, there's not really, nothing, I just did a job. Oh, after I got back from there, they did send over a master sergeant to help me. He kept track of the paperwork, answered the phone and stuff. When if I got backed up, he'd go in the workshop and do some of the correction on some of those portable units. And let's see, then I got transferred. Well, they were closing that, eventually they were closing that base and they're moving. Eisenhower's ready to come in. He was going to get a jet. So they were, and also it was a real pain with the security in National Airport. It was right at the end of a civilian airport, so they had really a problem. So they moved over to Andrews, and what's the name, Eisenhower took his crew over there, but I was involved. When I got over to Andrews, I got assigned to a large transmitter site. And they had about 10, again, about 10 units, big transmitters. And we transmitted like to all the places in Europe, North Africa, Iceland, whatever, just about all over that area. And so I was there, and since the Master Sergeant in charge knew I worked on it, I was there 2 days. I was a shift supervisor. Nobody likes to be shift supervisor. I got too much paperwork. But anyway, so after a few months, I kept checking on what was my status with that, and because I was dating my wife at the time, fiance. But anyway, they didn't give me any positive results. So I said, oh. And in the meantime, they started having all those peace talks in Martine John and all that. So I said, hey, the game's going to be over there. And, things will settle out. So I withdrew my request and I got married. So lo and behold, I guess I was there about 14 months in Andrews. They sent me to a good old place known as Tooley, Greenland. And that Greenland can fool you, because Greenland is strictly one big ice cap. And, you know, like Iceland now, which you think would be just the opposite, they have a more temperate zone in Iceland than they do in Tooley. You know, but anyway, so I got up there, and I guess, let's see, I arrived up there about 53. The base just opened in 53 in the summer, and I got up there about the end of November.
They fly you up in an airplane?
Oh, one of them big ones.
Yeah.
Well, every time they did that, they used to, I don't know what the model numbers are now, C5, C, whatever, the big, you know, and you didn't sit in front to back seats, you know, we used to sit in the side. And they'd always have a load of, I remember one of the things, the place smelled like celery. They must have had a ton of salads and celery. Oh, that's how they used to get the fresh veggies up there, and, you know, other fresh items. And the only other time they did any resupplying was the 3 months in the summer. That's the only time they could break up the ice flow. And we had, a big field of tanks for fuel. Because at that time, now you were talking about the Cold War earlier, the Cold War in the mid-50s was really getting bad. And we had fighter jets up there. And, you know, we had our radar and all that, just keeping to see if the Ruskies were, or whoever was going to try to sneak over the North Pole.
That was a DEW line, right?
And that's part of the DEW line, and B mules or something like that. I forget what it is.
The distant early warning.
And this is an early warning system. And right now they still have stuff, but when I was up there, I'm guessing now, it was a pretty big base with maybe 2,000, but if you go on the internet now, you can find out about Tooley, the weather, and whatever you want. It's on the internet. And I think they tell you even there's not but a couple hundred men now, because with satellites and all that, plus we went to missiles, so, you know, they don't expect long-range bombers to be coming over there anymore.
How long were you there?
So, okay, let's go, we'll take that. Well, how much time we got? Okay? Huh?
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, when I first arrived there, they said, we're going to assign you to a comm center. I said, okay, you know, work different electronics, you know, power, and it was a multiplex equipment. It was brand new stuff. The fellas, two guys that were, the two sergeants that were working on it when I got there, their year was almost up, and they were ready to leave in 2 weeks. And they says, where'd you go to school for this? I gave him that blank stare. He says, you didn't go? I said, no. He said, boy, we got to get busy for 2 weeks. Fortunately, he said, oh, somebody else is coming to help you. 2 days later, an airman arrived. And he was in the same thing as I was. He didn't know anything. So they gave us a 2-week crash course. And fortunately, we didn't have any real problem, but they had a spare unit. So I said we had 4, I don't remember, 4 or 6. If number 2 broke, we could switch in the swap and then work on number 2 in our convenience. So that's how we got around it. Fortunately, the 2 fellows that left before us, they gave us a pretty good, you know, training on what we had to do. And let's see, and the buildings there were built like refrigerators, except you lived on the inside and the coal was on the outside. And the handles, like on some of the unique things was the handles on the doors to get in and out of the building, that was made of plastic, so when you grabbed it, you didn't leave your hand there. All those little things. All buildings were built above the ground about 2-3 feet, because if you put the building right on a permafrost, after a period of time, the heat of the building would melt and the building would shift or tilt, you know. So there was a lot of little things like that. And water. They had to truck all the water in and truck all the waste out. And they had different connections to make sure which was which. So anyway, that was a problem there. I think later on, years, they couldn't put the utility lines under the ground because of the current. Everything was run above the ground. Later on, because we got there 53, or I did, and it kind of was new. A lot of stuff was new there. Matter of fact, one of the receiver sites or something wasn't even completely built, but they all came back. And a lot of telephone work, I remember, was done by the Canadian Telephone. It was a Bell Taylor 8. It was just from Canada they came up.
How long did you spend there?
I spent a year total.
Yeah. So you went through the winter and everything?
Oh, that's another thing.
Yeah.
There is a dark season. It starts November 22nd and ends February 12th. There is absolutely no daylight whatsoever. It's dark. And in the summertime, you got daylight from June, July, August, something like that. And when you come out of to me, if I remember correctly here, when you come out of the building, if it was 2 a.m., the sun was over here. If it was 2 p.m., the sun was over here. You know, it just stayed up there in a circle almost. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but basically, that's what the sun did. And then it took about a 3-month period to change. Like in February 12th, maybe you start seeing a little bit of twilight. So by June, it was full daylight. But it wasn't like overnight. It took several months.
How'd you keep in touch with your wife and your family?
Well, they had a ham radio, and we used to call. It's not like now you get on your cell phone and call. Boy, it'd be a pleasure to be up there now. But I called once or twice on the ham radio, and it was. But then I had a problem. Excuse me again. I'm not used to talking this long. But anyway, my mother passed away. Let's see, she was 44. Just a long time ago too. But let's see, let's go for something different. But anyway, the chaplain and the Red Cross got me to get home. And well, the war had pretty much toned down in Korea.
Yeah. So
they says, well, you know, you can go home. And I was home for like 10 days or whatever it was. I go from my brother, who was stationed in the States, he was able to make the funeral too.
Was he in the Air Force?
He was in the Air Force too.
Yeah.
But he was in the States somewhere. I forget exactly where.
Yeah.
But anyway, then back up there, and I had about 3 months to do. Now, if I had less than like 60 days or something, they would have just, you know,
Yeah.
wouldn't be worth it. But so I'm back up there, and I spent, and it was around, since I went up there at the end of November, it was about the 1st of December, or somewhere in the early part of December, I left there. And I had about 5 months when I got back. So they were pretty kind to me. They sent me down to Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, and it was summertime. I mean, for me, this was this was January for us up here, but down there it was very mild.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had a decision to make. I was having 7 years in now, and when you get that far, hey, you got to make a decision. Either you're going to stay with the game for the whole time, or you're going to, you know, quit the team. But anyway, so I said, well, one of my friends brought in a paper from New Orleans. New Orleans was only about 60, 70 miles away, whatever, from the base. And they had in there, they were looking for electronic technicians for IBM.
Right.
And the guy said, here, why don't you try this? He says, you know, I says, yeah. He says, you got 2 months to make up your mind. And he says, even if you take the job and you don't like it, you got 3 months to come back in without loss of rank or anything. But he said, you got to make a decision like by 3 months. So what did I do? I said, okay. So I took the test for IBM, and they hired me, and I ended up working in the Air Force SAGE project, which was I still hung around with a bunch of Air Force guys for the next 7 years.
So you were a civilian, but you were working for the Air Force.
Working for, IBM had the contract for the computers. I think Western Electric had the contract for the telephones, lines, and somebody else had, RAND Corporation had the programming contract. So everybody had a piece of the action.
Was it down there you were working?
Where?
Mississippi?
No, no.
Came back.
They sent me back up here to, that's how I ended up in Kingston.
Oh, you came to Kingston?
And for schooling.
Yeah.
Then after schooling, then I went to a couple of Air Force bases where I worked as, you know, not only me, but they had some of the bases where I went to, we'd have maybe 20-some people, IBMers.
Yeah.
Then they kept cutting back, so by a certain period of time, the Air Force took over completely. So then I came back to Kingston, and I worked, you know, at Kingston on various projects till I retired.
So how long did you work for IBM then?
Almost 30 years, 28, 29 years. So I like to sum up the service.
Yeah.
I like you know, I didn't have any problem with the military. The food, everybody complained about the food or this or that, but all, you know, they gave me, the Navy provided me with electronic training, which allowed me to get a job when I come out. And the Air Force, I had a lot of responsibility in Air Force. I went to NCO leadership school, and they taught you about responsibility and all that. So I learned a lot, and both in the educational field and, you know, in the leadership field and all that, and responsibility in general. And it made, you know, gave me a better outlook in civilian life. And I know I developed, I think if you've all been in there, you develop a lot of patience when you're in the military. Because for 7 years, I stood in line every breakfast, every lunch, and every dinner. And sometimes the food wasn't good, and I'd say, why did I stand in line for this? But it was, you know, overall, it was, the one thing about that was up, when we went to Tooley, or up there, they didn't have too much fresh salads, and they brought it up in planes with, I don't know how often they came up there with but a lot of canned stuff. They used to push pineapple juice. I don't know why pineapple and grapefruit juice. No orange juice. That's what, very rare. I said, why the heck don't they have orange juice? I mean, you know, but they must have got this wholesale or something. Oh, yeah. And we had, and let's see what else about that, about eating up there. Oh, but we didn't have much in the way of salads. But I read later on in the internet how much better they improved the sites. You know, like more supply planes would bring up fresh salads and all that. Then I guess too, if the complement of men, near the end, complement of men up there shrunk, so then they didn't have to bring so many supplies. So let's see.
So eventually you did join the American Legion here. Right?
Oh, I joined. I've been here about 17 years as a member of the American Legion. When I first came out, I guess I was so busy with the family and the job, and you know. Oh, that's another thing. When I first got out of the service, I moved around, as I said, with the SAGE project, as a couple of different Air Force sites. So that took up some time, and then I said once things settled down and the children were leaving home, then I figured, well, you know, I have more time now to devote. And let's see what else, as far as the military. Oh, I don't know if I should say this on TV or not, but I think, personally, you know, listen to politics, I think they're going to have to go back to a draft. Right now, I seen cartoons this past week in the 2 papers of the difficulty they're having getting people to join. They had one there was a sergeant sitting outside the Senior Citizen Center, and he's trying to recruit guys coming out of the Senior Citizens. Hey kid, you want a job? And the guy's there with a kid. So it's tough to get people to join, and this, they also, from what according to the thing, indicated that they increased the age you can join now, the National Guard and the Reserves. Is that true? I mean, you're still involved. I don't know how much they increased it up to or what. It just was not a nasty cartoon. It was, you know, it was just saying how much of a problem they're having getting people to come into the service now. you know, a lot of people don't want to join it. It's tough. It's a tough life.
But you joined 2 services, right?
Well, yeah, like I say, the first service I know I had to go.
Yeah.
The second service, I was afraid I'd have to go back to the first one.
Yep.
So I took the second one. Well, I did have dreams of, you know, being a pilot. You know, everybody, every kid that age has it. And jets were new in them days. You know, that was the jets were really new in them days, and it was everybody's dream to be one. But you know, I can't say one bad word about being in the service. Oh, now it may have been different if I was in combat and in Korea, freezing up in the mountains. You've seen them. Now my attitude may have changed, but based on just my experience, I didn't find nothing wrong. Tooley was cold. The buildings were built to stand 200 an hour, miles per hour wind. 200 miles an hour, that's moving for the wind. And temperature for 100 degrees below zero. Because actually it didn't snow. When the wind would blow off the ice cap, it would pick up little flecks of ice. And we'd have what they call whiteouts. And you couldn't see, and you weren't supposed to move. If you were stuck at work, we had sea rations and rations at all the building. Let's see. Oh, I forget what were sea rations. But anyway, if you were stuck at the work, you stayed there till that was over. It'd be just like a snowstorm here, but it was coming off at like just flecks of ice coming off, and there was nothing stopping. There's no trees. It's just coming gliding along that ice at a couple hundred miles an hour. Now, I never seen it 200 miles an hour. You know, there was one up there, but I don't know, maybe 70, 80, you know, it was like, you know, so, but it was, you know, I say, if anybody ever really wants to check on what the environment is there, you can get on the internet, and you almost find anything on the internet nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, we want to thank you for your service, and thanks for sharing your story.
Right.
Thank you very much.